Hi, I'm Spencer. I cook, I develop recipes, and I make ceramic plates and bowls. I'm passionate about food and how it brings people together. Today, we're gonna make Gougères. Gougères are a savory French cheese puff. They're so delicious, and they're made with a type of dough called pâte à choux, which means cabbage paste, literally. And it comes from the idea of when you make them, they look like little cabbages that are baked up. But it's the same kind of dough that you use to make eclairs or cream puffs, or even churros use the same kind of dough. And you make it by taking a liquid, and you put flour into it, you cook it together to make this paste, let it cool, and you mix in eggs. And that eggs provide the leavener, and it puffs up in the oven, and these are really, really delicious. So let me run you guys through the ingredients and supplies that you'll need to make Gougères. First of all, we have the liquids. We have milk and water. We're gonna use butter and salt to season our liquid. Then we have all-purpose flour, and then we're gonna use some eggs. And then to season the Gougères, once it's made into the dough, we have some chives and nutmeg, and we have cheese. A note on the cheese, it's best to use like a drier aged cheese. I'm using cheddar today, but traditionally Gruyère or Emmentaler or Comté are all really good cheeses, but use what you have, just not like a fresh cheese that has a lot of water in it. For equipment, we are gonna be cooking on the stove. So I have a small pot on a burner. We have some cutting boards and knives and things. We have spoons to use them, and I also have a retractable ice cream scoop, which is not traditional, but it works really well. Traditionally use a piping bag, you can use that as well. A mixing bowl, you can use a hand mixer or a stand mixer if you want. It makes it so much easier, but I wanna do things a little bit the hard way. A microplane, which is a grater, and some knives, so that's about it. So the first thing we do is we measure out our liquid. I have a half a cup of water here, and I'm gonna add another half cup of milk. So that goes together in this pot. The reason why we have milk and water is the water gives us a higher boiling point, so we're able to get it a lot hotter, and the milk actually has a lot of sugars and protein, which helps with browning. You could totally use all milk or all water. I kind of like the half-half. And we're gonna turn that on, and then we're gonna add 6 tablespoons of butter and a heavy pinch of salt. So give that a good stir, and we're just gonna wait till bubbles form and it comes to a light boil. You don't want this to come to a rolling boil. So our milk is coming to a boil, and what we're gonna do now is add our flour. So we're just using 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Some people use bread flour because that gives more structure and allows it to rise more, and some people use cake flour, which gives a more tender pastry in the end. I like all-purpose just because it's the middle of the road and gives you a little bit of both. Best way to measure flour is you dip your measuring cup in, a little dip and sweep. So you dip it in, and then you sweep it off with a knife or something flat. It gives you the most accurate measurement other than by weight. So as you can see, we're coming to a boil, and all at once we're gonna add the flour and we're gonna stir it. And what this is gonna do is the flour is gonna cook. Together it's gonna form this paste. And what's happening is the flour is gelatinizing and the starches are bursting, which thickens up the flour and cooks it. And because we're cooking it, this paste, or it's called a panade, this panade has the cooked flour, and what we're able to do is dry it out. We want to get as much water out as possible. And we want to do that because we want to get a lot of egg in there. So the less water we can get in there, the more egg we can get in there, which means we get a nice, tall, risen puff. So you want to cook it for a couple minutes until you start to, it kind of turns to this texture that resembles mashed potatoes. As you can see here, a skin is starting to form, and that's good. You want to keep cooking it until it dries out. So we're almost there. I know we're almost there because if you look at this texture, it kind of is starting to hold together as a firm paste. And then do you see how there's this layer at the bottom? You don't want to scrape that off. But I'm gonna turn our heat off. And now we're gonna pour this into a mixing bowl to let it cool off. So you put it in there. You could also put it in the bowl of your KitchenAid stand mixer or whatever. I kind of like to spread it out so it cools faster. But you want to let it cool for about 10 to 15 minutes so it gets to about room temperature, because we're gonna add the eggs next. And we don't want to put the cold eggs into the hot mixture, because that'll kind of cook and scramble the egg, so that's why we let it cool. So our pâte à choux is cooled down at a temperature where it won't cook the eggs. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add the eggs in one at a time until it's fully incorporated. I'm doing it by hand, but like I said before, you can use a hand mixer or you can use a stand mixer as well. Recipe is 4 large eggs. I have an extra egg just in case. But what makes it easiest is if you crack all the eggs in a bowl, just to have them all ready to go. And that way you don't have to worry about shell or anything. So here we go. We're gonna start with 1 egg at a time. And you mix it together. And sometimes it doesn't look like it's gonna come together, but keep mixing and it will. And if you wanted to make cream puffs or eclairs or churros, you do the same thing and you just don't add the cheese and the chives. And you can make that, and it's really fun. So now that the first egg is in, we're gonna add the second egg. And it always looks like you're adding too much and it won't come together. And then at the last minute, all these little flakes of the pâte à choux come together and it mixes well into a dough. And this dough is kind of like somewhere between a dough and a batter, and it holds a lot of water from the egg. And that gives it its leavening power and makes it help it rise. Because there's no baking soda in this, there's no baking powder or yeast. It all comes from the egg. Next egg going in. And if your arms get tired, it's totally fine, you know? Just ask your small child or significant other to help you out here. I don't know why I said small child. And there's a really cool indicator that I'll show you guys when you know you have enough egg in here. So last egg. It's great. My arms are getting a little tired. But yeah, if you're using a stand mixer or hand mixer, you do the same thing and just I would use a paddle attachment and just mix in 1 egg at a time. It is much easier, but I kind of like doing it by hand. I like the connection you have with it. All right, so all 4 eggs are in, and here's how you know that you have enough egg in there. When you pull it out, do you see this V that happens? That's when you know that the batter is at the right consistency. If you're not there, crack another egg and just add a little bit of egg, 1 spoonful at a time until you get there. But this looks fantastic. Now we're gonna add the other ingredients which makes the Gougère a Gougère. It makes it savory. So we're gonna add 1.5 cups of cheese that's been grated. We're gonna add some black pepper, and the black pepper is important because it gives it that little spice. You can add a pinch of cayenne too if you want, but I like a lot of black pepper. I didn't put a lot of salt at the beginning because cheese does have a lot of salt in it. Grate of nutmeg. When I like buying nutmeg, I like actually buying the actual nut of nutmeg and using a microplane. It gives you a much better flavor. And lastly, some chives, which gives it a nice, fresh, kind of oniony flavor, which is really nice in the Gougère. Give it a couple folds, make sure we're all incorporated well. Cheese is mixed in. The batter is pretty stiff now. Okay, so now we're gonna spoon out the Gougères. Traditionally, you would use a piping bag, but I'm gonna use a little easier method and less traditional. So one method is to take 2 spoons. I have a bowl of water here. If you kind of wet them, it makes it a little easier. But you wanna scoop kind of like large golf ball sized balls with your 2 spoons. And you kind of use 1 spoon to kind of push it off like that. And they don't have to be perfectly round. They honestly puff up a lot in the oven, and that fixes a lot of things. And this is a great recipe to get kids involved in the kitchen. Don't worry if there's little parts sticking up. I'll show you guys how to fix that. Try and make them as even as you can. So the way they get a little smoother is you actually dip your finger in some water so the dough doesn't stick, and kind of pat it down. And that makes it a little more rounded. Cool. So that's one tray, and then I'm gonna actually show you another even easier way, and even more or less traditional. Use a retractable ice cream scoop. I use this for I use it more for like other things than actual ice cream. I use it for cookie dough a lot. So you do the same thing, and this will make actually a little bit bigger, but you fill up the scoop. This is a number 20, and you literally just put it on here like that and scoop off like that. And it gets like a perfect round circle. You do want to space them a little bit apart because they do rise quite a bit. They mostly rise up. So the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna sprinkle cheese on it, and I have cheese down here. And the cheese helps it to brown and gives it more of that nice cheesy flavor. And it melts and bubbles, and it's fantastic, you know? Who doesn't love a little caramelized golden brown cheese? So these will go into a 400-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes until they're golden brown and all the sides are nice and golden brown and they've puffed up really nicely. So our Gougeres are done. They're nice and golden brown, fresh, hot out of the oven. It smells so good in here. But one of the common problems that Gougeres have is they tend to deflate right out of the oven. Some things you can do to avoid that is really monitor the water content in the dough. So make sure you're cooking the panade, cooking that dough as much as you can to get the water out of it. Make sure you're using dry aged cheese and cheese that doesn't have a lot of water content in it. Make sure you have enough egg, but not a ton of egg. Use large eggs, not the jumbo eggs. And then make sure when you're cooking it, don't open the oven. Let it stay in there. Look through the little window inside, but make sure it gets golden brown on the sides, because those are the walls that really will hold the gougere up so they don't deflate. If they deflate, that's fine. A lot of mine have. They still taste great and they're fantastic. Gougeres are really good frozen too. So if you cool them and then store them in the freezer, and then reheat them in the oven, they taste just the same as well. Gougeres are a great snack before lunch or after lunch, before dinner, after dinner, any time of the day. Every time I make Gougeres, I'm like, why don't I make these more? They're so cheesy, and when they're warm, like they're so good. I hope you guys like this video, and I hope you guys make these Gougeres. Please tag us on Instagram if you do make them, and please like and subscribe to this video. Comment below if you make these Gougeres, because we want to hear all about it, all right? Thank you.